I justified the age gap to everyone, until I heard him use the same lines on someone even younger. I was 23 when I met Colton at a gallery opening. He was 41, charming, and said things like, "You're so different from women my age. You actually see the world with fresh eyes." I thought it was a compliment. My friends didn't. My mom refused to meet him. "Men his age who date girls your age do it because women their age won't put up with their shit," she said. I defended him, told them age was just a construct. For 8 months, I believed it. He paid for everything, introduced me as his muse, made me feel sophisticated. He'd whisper, "You're so much smarter than you realize." When I got upset, he'd say, "This is why I can't date women my age. They're so jaded. You still have that beautiful innocence." Then I stopped by his studio unannounced. The door was unlocked. I heard his voice from the back room. Through the cracked door, I saw her, 19 at most, perched on his work table. "You're so different from women my age," he was saying. "You actually see the world with fresh eyes." Word for word. "They just don't appreciate how smart you are yet," he continued. She giggled, blushing exactly like I had. Every intimate moment we'd shared was a script. Every compliment was recycled. I didn't confront him. I drove to my friend Tessa's apartment and told her everything. "I need to find out how many," I said. "How many of us there are." We started with his social media. The pattern was obvious. Every 10 to 14 months, a new young woman appeared. Always early 20s or younger. Always his muse. Comments were telling. "Another one?" someone wrote in 2019. Tessa found his ex-wife's Facebook. She'd written a blog post titled, "Why I Finally Left." In it, she described how he'd mentored a 20-year-old art student, how he'd told his wife she was too bitter. They divorced when she found text messages. The same messages he'd sent me. We found 4 others. I sent each a message. "Did he ever tell you that you see the world with fresh eyes?" 3 responded within 24 hours. We met at a coffee shop. There was Ainsley, 25 now, who'd dated him at 19, Quinn, 27, who'd been 21, and Bex, 29, who'd been his student at 20. The script was identical. The way he'd isolate us from friends, how he'd frame himself as the mature one. "He got me an apartment," Ainsley said quietly. Then when I started asking about meeting his family, he said I'd become too possessive. Quinn nodded. "He told me I'd become jaded." We were all 19 to 23 when we'd met him, all discarded around 25. "What happens when we report this?" Bex asked. "Report what?" I said bitterly. Everything was legal. That night, the girl from his studio, Faye, posted a photo. Caption, "Age is just a number when you find your soulmate." My phone buzzed. "Quinn, we need to warn her." Ainsley, "She won't listen." We didn't. Then Tessa sent a link. A news article from 2003. Colton had been a high school teacher. He'd resigned after an investigation into an inappropriate relationship with a student. No charges filed. The student was 17. He was 32. I stared at my phone, hands shaking. This wasn't just a pattern. This wasn't just manipulation. This was something darker. Something that had been going on for decades. And Faye had no idea what she'd walked into. The next morning, I woke up to 30 missed calls. All from numbers I didn't recognize. When I finally answered one, a woman's voice asked, "Are you the one who's been contacting Colton's exes?" My blood went cold. "Who is this?" "Someone who's been trying to find you girls for 3 years." Her name was Vivian. She was 38 now. Had been Colton's student when she was 16 and he was 29. Back when he'd taught at a private high school in Connecticut, she'd convinced herself it was love, that she was mature for her age, that their connection transcended the rules. They'd hidden it for 2 years until graduation. Then he'd moved across state lines with her and promised marriage. "I aged out at 24, she said over coffee that afternoon. Her hands trembled around her mug. One day he told me I'd become cynical, that I'd lost what made me special. 3 weeks later, I found receipts for an apartment he'd rented for someone named Delilah. She was 20. Vivian had spent years trying to warn others. She'd tracked down 7 women. Some believed her, most didn't. Colton was always one step ahead, painting her as an obsessed ex. She'd tried reporting him to police, to school boards, to anyone who'd listen, but everything was technically legal. Age gaps weren't crimes. Emotional manipulation left no evidence. "There's more of us," she said. "I know there are. He moves cities every few years, reinvents himself. I've traced him back to 1998. I texted the group. We met at Tessa's apartment that night. All of us plus Vivian. Quinn brought wine. Bex brought a murder board. Ainsley brought her laptop and a frightening amount of determination. "We need to find all of them," Bex said. "Every single girl." We started with public records. Colton had lived in 6 different cities since 2000. Connecticut, Vermont, Portland, Austin, Denver, and now Chicago. Each move coincided with the end of a relationship. Each city had a trail. Ainsley created a spreadsheet. Names, ages when they'd met him, duration of relationship, patterns. Quinn handled social media, scrolling through years of tagged photos and comments. I researched news archives and court records. By 3 a.m., we had 14 names. By dawn, we had 19. Some were easier to find than others. The ones who'd been public about their relationship with him, who'd been paraded as his muse at gallery openings and art shows. Others were ghosts, erased from his history the moment they'd become inconvenient. Tessa set up an anonymous email account. We sent identical messages to each woman, short, direct. "Did Colton ever tell you that you see the world with fresh eyes?" The responses came slowly. Some women didn't reply. 2 told us to stop harassing them, but 9 answered yes. One message stood out. From a woman named Rhiannon in Portland. I was 18. He was 38. I got pregnant. He drove me to the clinic himself and told me I was too young to ruin my life. Then he ghosted me. I was going to kill myself. My therapist saved me. Another from Lorelei in Austin. He isolated me from everyone. My family, my friends. I thought it meant he loved me. When I turned 24, he said I'd become too dependent, that I needed to find myself. I had nowhere to go. I lived in my car for 3 months. The stories were carbon copies. The same script, the same manipulation, the same abandonment. Some had been students, some had worked service jobs when he'd noticed them. All had been young, all had been discarded. We compiled everything into a document. 43 pages, 22 women, 2 decades of pattern. We sent it to Faye with a subject line, "The Fresh Eyes Speech." She read it in 12 minutes. I know because she called me crying at 2 a.m. He said I was different, she sobbed. He said I was special. You are different, I told her. You get to leave before it destroys you. Faye moved out the next day, stayed with her cousin in Milwaukee, blocked his number. 2 weeks later, Colton was spotted at a coffee shop near Northwestern University, chatting up a barista who couldn't have been older than 20. We can't stop him, Quinn said during our next meeting. Not legally. Then we stop him another way, Vivian said. We created a website. Simple, clean, thecoltonfiles.com. We posted everything. The timeline, the patterns, the testimonies from 15 women who'd agreed to share their stories publicly. We included the news article about his teaching resignation, screenshots of his messages, side-by-side comparisons of the identical compliments he'd used across 2 decades. We didn't editorialize, didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. Within 48 hours, the site had 12,000 views. Within a week, 3 more women had come forward, 1 from his time in Vermont, 2 from Denver we'd somehow missed. The total was 25 now. Then came the message we'd been waiting for, the one that changed everything. Her name was Genevieve. She was 31. She'd been 17 when she'd met Colton in 2003, the student from the Connecticut investigation. I need to tell you what really happened, she wrote. I need you to know why there were no charges. We met at a diner in Oak Park. Genevieve looked exhausted, like she'd aged a decade in the past week. She ordered coffee but didn't drink it. I was in his AP art history class, she began. He told me I had potential, that I could be a real artist if I had the right mentor. He gave me private lessons after school. At first it was just art. Then it became something else. She paused, stared at her untouched coffee. It started the day after my 17th birthday. He kissed me in his classroom, told me age didn't matter when you found your soulmate. I believed him. We hid it for 8 months, until another teacher saw us in his car after a school event. The school launched an investigation. Genevieve's parents were called in. She was questioned by administrators, by police, by counselors, and she lied, told them nothing had happened, that the teacher had misunderstood, that Colton was innocent. He coached me on what to say, she whispered, practiced it with me the night before, told me if I loved him, I'd protect what we had. So I did. I destroyed my own case. Without her testimony, there was no evidence. Colton resigned to avoid further scrutiny, moved to Vermont, waited exactly 2 months before contacting Genevieve again. She ran away from home 3 days after graduation, lived with him for 7 years. He broke me, she said, completely. When he finally left me, I had nothing. No degree, no job experience, no friends. I'd spent my entire adult development trapped with him. It took me years of therapy to even function. She pulled out a folder. Inside were journals, dozens of them, documentation of everything, dates, conversations, photos, receipts, 7 years worth of evidence. I kept them hidden, she said. Part of me always knew I'd need proof someday, that someone would need to know the truth. Tessa reached across the table and squeezed Genevieve's hand. We need to find the others from Connecticut, Genevieve said. The girls from before me, because I wasn't his first. I know I wasn't. She was right. We found 3 more, all former students. All had relationships with him that started when they were 16 or 17. All had protected him when questioned. All had been destroyed by it. One was now a recovered addict. Another had spent time in psychiatric treatment. The third had changed her name and moved to Canada to escape her past. We were up to 28 women now. The oldest was 41. The youngest was Faye at 19. The pattern stretched back to at least 1996, possibly earlier. We need a lawyer, Beck said. Someone who specializes in this. Vivian knew someone. A woman named Roxanne Chen who'd built her career prosecuting sexual predators. She'd taken down 3 separate grooming rings and had a reputation for creative legal strategy. Roxanne met with us on a Tuesday. She reviewed our documentation for 6 hours straight. Didn't speak except to ask clarifying questions. When she finally closed the last folder, she looked at us with an expression I couldn't quite read. This is the most comprehensive pattern documentation I've ever seen, she said. But you know what the problem is. We knew. Everything's legal, Quinn said bitterly. Age gaps aren't crimes. Not quite, Roxanne said. The Connecticut case changes things. Genevieve was a minor. He was in a position of authority. The statute of limitations hasn't run out on certain charges if we can prove the relationship continued past her 18th birthday in a way that constitutes coercive control. She explained the legal theory. How a relationship that begins when someone is a minor doesn't become suddenly consensual the moment they turn 18. How the power dynamic established through grooming persists. how coercive control laws in some states could apply retroactively. It's a long shot, Roxanne admitted, but I've won longer shots. The problem is we need Genevieve to testify, and we need evidence that the relationship continued in a way that demonstrates ongoing manipulation and control. Genevieve had 7 years of journals, proof of isolation, financial control, emotional manipulation, proof that the relationship that started when she was 17 had been designed from the beginning to trap her. "I'll do it," she said, "whatever it takes." But Roxanne had another strategy too, a public one. "The court of law is one thing," she said. "The court of public opinion is another. He's an artist. He relies on galleries, on patrons, on his reputation. We destroy that. We destroy his ability to access new victims. We expanded the website, added Genevieve's story with her permission, included testimony from 2 other Connecticut students, posted photos of Colton at various ages next to photos of his victims at the ages they'd met him. The visual was damning. A 32-year-old man next to a 17-year-old girl. A 38-year-old man next to a 19-year-old. Over and over. The art world noticed. First came the anonymous comments on gallery websites. Then the whisper campaign. Then a prominent art critic wrote an essay titled, "The Problem with Colton's Muses." It went viral. Gallery openings were canceled. Representation was dropped. A museum removed his work from an upcoming exhibition. Colton responded exactly as we'd expected. He posted a long statement on Instagram about cancel culture and artistic persecution, about how his relationships were consensual and between adults, how bitter exes were trying to destroy him. It might have worked, except we'd prepared for it. Within an hour, we posted screenshots. Every message where he'd used the identical script. Every photo showing the age gaps. Every court record, every news article, every piece of evidence we'd compiled. And then Faye did something brilliant. She'd kept recordings, voicemails he'd left, videos he'd sent. She posted them side by side with older recordings Vivian had saved. You could hear it. The exact same cadence, the exact same phrases, separated by 15 years. "You're so different from women my age. You see the world with fresh eyes. You're smarter than you realize." Over and over, different women, same script. The art world turned on him completely. But it was what happened next that we didn't expect. A woman named Iris contacted us. She was 45. She'd been Colton's high school girlfriend when they were both 16. They'd dated for 2 years, broken up when he went to college. She'd moved on, gotten married, had kids, hadn't thought about him in decades, until she saw our website. "There's something you need to know about Colton," she wrote. "About his family, about where this came from." We met her at a library in Evanston. She brought a box of old photos and newspaper clippings. "Colton's father was a high school principal," she said. "Charismatic, beloved. Everyone thought he was this pillar of the community. When Colton was 14, his father was arrested. He'd been having relationships with students for years. Multiple girls, some as young as 15. She spread the clippings across the table. Headlines from 1992. Principal arrested in student scandal. Beloved educator accused of grooming ring. Multiple victims come forward. Colton's father went to prison," Iris continued. 3 years. When he got out, the family moved to start over. But Colton had watched the whole thing, saw how his father manipulated these girls, saw the patterns. And instead of being disgusted by it, I think he learned from it. She pulled out a photo. Teenage Colton with his father. The resemblance was striking, but it was the expression that got me. That charming smile. That calculated warmth. "I broke up with Colton because he scared me," Iris said. "He had this way of making me feel special and worthless at the same time, of isolating me from my friends while making it seem like I was choosing him over them. I was 17 and I couldn't articulate what was wrong, but I knew I needed to get away." She'd dodged a bullet, but she'd spent 27 years wondering if she'd been paranoid, if she'd thrown away something good. Now she knew. "I want to help," she said. "However I can." We added her story to the website. The generational pattern, the learned behavior, the cycle of abuse passed from father to son. The media picked it up. Local news first, then national. A podcast did a 6-episode series. A documentary filmmaker reached out about rights. Colton disappeared from social media, from Chicago entirely. We tracked him to a small town in Montana. Wondered if he'd finally stop, if the exposure had been enough. Then Roxanne called. "We're filing charges," she said. "Connecticut statute allows for prosecution of coercive control in relationships that originated while the victim was a minor. We're going after him for what he did to Genevieve. And we're filing civil suits on behalf of 8 other women for emotional distress and fraud." The case took 14 months to build. Genevieve testified. So did 2 other Connecticut students. The journals were entered as evidence. The pattern documentation, the recordings, everything. During discovery, Colton's lawyers turned over his files. We found more victims, his own documentation, photos organized by year, by name, notes on what approaches worked with which type of girl. It was calculated, methodical. He'd been studying this for 30 years. The criminal trial lasted 3 weeks. Genevieve was on the stand for 2 days. She detailed how he'd groomed her, isolated her, controlled every aspect of her life from 17 to 24, how she'd been unable to leave despite wanting to, how he'd systematically destroyed her sense of self. The defense argued consensuality, that she'd stayed willingly, that she'd been an adult for most of the relationship. But Roxanne brought in expert testimony, psychologists who specialized in coercive control, who explained how grooming creates trauma bonds, how victims can't simply leave, how age gaps combined with isolation create power imbalances that negate true consent. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. Guilty on 3 counts of coercive control. Guilty on 2 counts of sexual misconduct with a minor. Colton was sentenced to 12 years, with parole eligibility after 8. The civil suits settled, confidential amounts. But I know Genevieve got enough to finish her degree, to pay for her therapy, to rebuild the life he'd stolen. The website stayed up. We still get messages, sometimes from new victims we'd never found, sometimes from women in similar situations asking for help. We've connected over 40 women now, created a support network, a community of survivors. Faye just graduated college. She's studying psychology, wants to work with adolescent girls in abusive relationships. Quinn wrote a book about pattern recognition and predatory behavior. It's used in training programs now. Bex went to law school, works with Roxanne's firm. Ainsley became an art therapist. Vivian started a nonprofit. Resources for women leaving age gap relationships, education on grooming tactics, support groups. Genevieve got her degree in social work. She's 33 now, engaged to someone her own age, someone who treats her like an equal. As for me, I think about that day at his studio a lot, hearing him use my script on someone else. The moment I realized I'd been a placeholder, interchangeable, just another entry in his pattern. But I also think about what came after, how we found each other, how we built something from the wreckage, how we turned his systematic destruction into systematic resistance. Last month, I got a message from a 19-year-old named Paloma. She'd met a 42-year-old man at a bookstore. He told her she was different from women his age, that she saw the world with fresh eyes. She'd Googled the phrase, found our website, recognized the pattern before she got trapped in it. "Thank you," she wrote. "You saved me." That's 41 women now. 41 women who know the truth, who can name what happened to them, who found each other across cities and years and built something he could never destroy. Sometimes I wonder if Colton thinks about us in prison, if he understands what we did. We didn't just expose one predator. We exposed the pattern, made it impossible to hide, created a roadmap for other women to recognize the signs. His father's victims never got justice. They were isolated, silenced, erased. But we weren't. We found each other. We documented everything. We refused to stay silent. And we made damn sure that when he got out in 8 years, everyone would know exactly who he was. His face plastered across Google, his pattern exposed, his script broken down line by line. He'd never be able to walk into a gallery or coffee shop or university and charm another 19-year-old with his fresh eyes speech. Because she'd Google him. She'd find us. She'd see the 41 women who came before her. She'd know that when a 40-something man tells you you're different from women his age, it's not because you're special. It's because women his age already know his script. And she'd walk away. That's the thing about patterns. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. And once you document them, you can't erase them. Colton took years from us, from all of us. He stole our early 20s, our trust, our sense of self. He tried to break us individually, but we found each other. And together, we broke his entire system. Last week, Tessa, Quinn, Bex, Ainsley, Vivian, Genevieve, and I met for dinner. 8 years after that first coffee shop meeting, we've made it a tradition now. Once a year, we gather. Remember? Celebrate. We toasted to the women who came before us, to the ones we saved, to the ones we'll never know about. And we toasted to each other, to surviving, to fighting back, to building something beautiful from something broken. Because that's the real ending to this story. Not his conviction, though that mattered. Not the settlements or the book deals or the nonprofit. The real ending is 41 women who refused to disappear, who turned isolation into community, who transformed his greatest weapon against us into our greatest strength. He spent 30 years perfecting his pattern. We spent 2 years dismantling it. And we won.